High blocking, or blocking to the head, is the shortest rule in the 5 penalty families, measuring in at just 103 words. And a great many of those are used in almost every rule and aren't particular to actually blocking above the shoulders. So as you might expect, this is a pretty simple rule. But if you ask skaters after a game, there's a pretty good chance that they'll tell you what was missed a lot was this very simple rule. Coming right behind that is blocking with the head. Since these are two sides of the same coin, and since both rules are pretty short, it seemed like a good time to go over both of these rules. Before we begin, however, I'd like to give you some fair warning. This presentation is not the official word from the WFTDA or MRDA. I am a level 4 referee with the WFTDA, but I am not working for them, and this has no official approval from them. I'm just a guy who wants to help out. And like anything that doesn't come with a WFTDA or MRDA seal of approval, take with an appropriate level of salt. In an effort to keep this presentation as correct as possible, I'm including the date that this presentation was recorded. In the event that I need to update the presentation due to something that was clarified or just out and out wrong, this date will change and there will be an update in the changelog that's listed with the presentation on refed.com. The date of this recording is September 6, 2015, and there have been no updates since the original presentation was recorded. Let's start with the more common high block call. The rule is pretty simple. Quote, any block with forceful contact landing above the shoulders, unquote, is a penalty. The term forceful contact means that we don't have to measure it against relative position like so many other penalties. The act of doing it, and doing it enough to hurt, is enough to make it a penalty. So why is it missed so much? I'd like you to take a moment and perform a little exercise. Take one of your fingers, brace it against your thumb, and then flick the tip of your nose. It hurt, didn't it? The thing with high blocks, and probably why it gets missed so often, is that it doesn't take much force to hurt like hell. I did some looking and found that a typical finger flick generates about 8 newtons of force. To break someone's nose, it takes 40 to 58 newtons of force. Not a whole lot more to start causing more serious damage. So if you closed your eyes and flinched before flicking your own nose, think about how much more it would hurt to have someone's arm, shoulder, or helmet connect with the face. And think about how little contact actually has to be made for it to hurt. And that's why it can be very difficult to catch high blocks. Sure, we can catch the big ones, but could we really see the equivalent of a finger flick from our positions? In most of these presentations I try to share what I've learned to help call these penalties better. And I'll be honest, I don't have a great one. I have a ton of sympathy for skaters who tell me that either I, or if I'm the head ref, my crew are missing high blocks, because they're probably right. The best I can hope for is that we're catching some of them, catching the really blatant ones, because if all it takes is that little flick to hurt like hell, well, you know why there's a rise in the number of face shields in the game. My best suggestion is to be cognizant of when faces come in close proximity to other opponents' body parts. Sometimes with size differences, that's any time a skater is in the pack. If you're a head referee and you've been told there are high blocks being missed, see if the skaters can tell you if there's anything systemic happening. Is it always happening in one part of the pack, or always to a jammer? Like any other information we get from captains, we don't want to focus only on one team or one player, or even assume they're right, but conversely, we don't want to assume that they're wrong. So let's shift to the other side of the coin, blocking with the head. On July 21st, 2015, the WFTDA Rules Committee issued a publication that changes things a bit. So if you've only read Rule 5.6, I highly suggest you read this as well. Like with high blocking, this rule is also very simple. Quote, the head may not be used to block an opponent, unquote. The rule goes on to say that incidental contact that doesn't cost laws of relative position is a no impact penalty. But incidental contact that does cause a loss of relative position, or just initiating a block with the head with contact, regardless of impact or advantage, is a penalty. There are two areas that muddy the waters a bit. The first is an area that's been plaguing me and other referees for a while, which is skaters who lead with their head. There's a dual argument that comes into play when this happens, and I can tell you what normally happens, but first let me tell you of the arguments. The first argument is that leading with the head is dangerous, but doesn't impact the rest of the game. If someone leads with the head and gets an elbow in the face, the call should still be a high block. The second argument is that leading with the head is analogous to blocking with the head, and that a high block shouldn't be called, and if there's a call at all, it could be on the skater who led with her head. Frequently, we get a no call. When the incident happens, we as referees can't see the difference in that split second between someone initiating their position with their head forward and the honest-to-goodness high block, and so no call is made at all. This is an initiation call, plain and simple. If the person leading with the head moved into an established position of an opponent and gets hit, then it's a penalty to the skater leading with the head. If she has established position, or the opponent moves an arm into that skater's established face, then the opposite is true. Can it be really difficult to tell who initiated? Absolutely. Most of the time when we think of initiation, we think of a full body initiating into another body. But when blocks to and from the head come into play, it's often not a body that's initiating, but a part of the body, such as an arm, or as you might imagine, the head itself. I've refed people who lead with their heads, and yes, it does increase the number of blocks to their face and calls in their favor, if you think getting a bop in the kisser is something in their favor. But I think I've done just as many or more no calls where I can't tell who initiated or couldn't see the contact. My suggestion is to be ready to explain that call or no call when it comes up. Have sympathy. Understand why they want that call and why they may not understand your no call should it happen. Nobody ever said our job was going to be an easy one. The second item that muddies the waters, and even potentially muddies our last scenario, is the rules publication that came out. The publication is dealing with Rule 5.6.2, which is in the no impact / no penalty section, and says that positional blocking with the head is not a penalty. But is it? The answer is yes and no. The publication talks about the necessity to give a penalty for deliberate positional blocking with the head. So when we talk about people leading with the head, like from the last slide, this is specifically excluded. Example 3 in the publication pretty well spells out that if a player's natural gameplay position is leading with the head, and it isn't deliberately using it as a get out of my way card, then it's not a penalty. What is a penalty is deliberately using the head to either draw a penalty or to force opposing skaters out of their way. Should that happen, because it's positionally blocking and contains no actual contact, the penalty is misconduct, not a blocking with the head. And if the action is so bad that it risks injury to both skaters, as if risking your own neck wasn't bad enough, you would need to recommend or call a gross misconduct expulsion. No contact is needed. So, let me summarize. Positional blocking with the head is not penalizable unless it's being deliberate. Further, first offense is a warning given to the teams, unless it's so bad that it warrants an expulsion. This seems to be a good segue back into rules 5.2 and 5.6 regarding expulsions. Since we've been talking about blocking with the head, we'll start with that. The phraseology used for blocking with the head mirrors most other penalties, which is blocking with the head in an intentional, negligent, or reckless manner. In short, contact with the head, since no contact is covered under gross misconduct, that is stupidly dangerous to either the initiator or the recipient. For blocking to the head, we actually get something different. Quote, expulsions will be issued for a conscious and forceful attempt to commit the following egregious actions, whether or not the attempt was successful, unquote. It then lists 3 items. 2 are very specific. Quote, any contact above the shoulders of an opponent not wearing a helmet, unquote. I haven't heard one way or another, but I would think opposing bench staff are also included in this. Another is, quote, pulling of the head, neck, or helmet, unquote, which is pretty darn specific. The third are the words we just talked about, intentional, negligent, or reckless, but it adds that it's in regards to contact above the shoulders. In other words, stupidly dangerous or deliberate. I think of all the expulsion categories, these are the ones I hope to never have to call. Our heads and spine are so vulnerable, even with day-to-day activity. Why someone would risk theirs or someone else's over the game is something I hope to never have to contemplate. I try to never complain when people say we're missing blocks to the head or blocks with the head. Our number one job is safety. And while they can be very difficult to spot, that doesn't relieve us of trying to find them. Head injuries are common enough through normal gameplay. The better we can do to catch them and to have them minimized, the happier everyone will be. I'd like to thank the following photographers who graciously allowed me to use their photographs in this presentation: Dolph Lensgren, Pre-Flash Gordon, and Quicken Derby. I'd also like to thank Wolfbite, Dr. Sorters, and Miss Behaven for volunteering to help me with my stage photos in this presentation, as well as the Minnesota Roller Girls for allowing me to use their practice space for these photos. If you found this presentation helpful, or think it or other presentations at refed.com might be helpful to others, please share this site, but please do not modify it or send it out without appropriate credit for its production. This presentation is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.